I want, I'm going to, whatever I want, I have to get.
A lot of what she said is almost verbatim to what she described in her initial lawsuit, or the complaint that she filed against.
Down in the middle of court, and your girl was in the main courtroom, and we saw it all. Was literally struggling, and I mean struggling, to find a way to frame things with Cassie.
Of a trove of digital evidence from Diddy's freak-offs and parties.
Basically, he would tell me what to do with Cassie. I had like 15 encounters, and I heard lots of business, because what they would do is Sean.
And then it'd be like, matter of fact, they sent me the girl pictures, like pictures of this girl, like, this y'all saw.
Her new remarks show a consistent position throughout, precisely mirroring the story and accusations from her original court petition. Even though things have changed, the primary plot of her story hasn't changed significantly. Sean Diddy Combs was an untouchable for years, representing riches, power, music aristocracy, and lavish parties. However, a much darker reality was subtly developing behind the glitz. Many wondered if Cassie Ventura's voice could upend the foundation of one of the most influential people in the industry when she courageously came forward to speak her truth. Diddy's vocal opponent, Curtis 50 Cent Jackson, has been raising the alarm for a long time before anyone was willing to pay attention. Then there was the leak, a covert video that made all the difference. The courtroom is now the platform on which Diddy's meticulously constructed persona is disintegrating in front of the world. The alleged hush money, baby oil, and Astroglide are not simply another celebrity dispute. They might lead to the downfall of an entire enterprise. You don't want to overlook the specifics. Imagine Diddy entering the courtroom, though, before you get caught up in the frenzy. The flamboyant tycoon who popped bottles with models was no more. Rather of being the iconic figure we've seen for decades, he looked more like an uncle at Thanksgiving, with gray hair and a simple sweater. There was silence in the room. Janice, his mother, sat and watched. And his kids. Imagine seeing your dad be charged with a crime that may cost him everything. The mood, definitely heavy.
They walked into the federal courthouse in Hatton, hand in hand, in a gesture of solidarity. Diddy's 85-year-old mom, Janice Combs, arrived.
Just before the judge enters the courtroom, Sean Diddy Combs, the singer of Can't Nobody Hold Me Down, is seen reading a Bible in silence. Perhaps the final hope for someone facing these explosive accusations was supernatural intervention. However, things soon became more sinister. It was necessary to pull Diddy's daughters out of the hearing because it was too graphic and upsetting for them to hear about their own father. The moment's actuality finally set in at that point. A scene from a psychological thriller then unfolded as Diddy and Cassie's husband, Alex Fine, met eyes across the courtroom. It was oppressively tense. Imagine being seated across from the man who is said to have tortured your wife for years. It was heavy, unvarnished, and memorable. Officer Israel Flo then testified that Cassie had a purple eye and was obviously disturbed. He said that she was afraid, and the jury was unable to turn away. It was akin to witnessing the spectacular conclusion of a sinister drama series. Diddy allegedly sat still the entire time, his eyes icy and even menacing. Witnesses say this is the same look that silenced individuals for more than 20 years as unimaginable atrocities took place behind closed doors.
Is alleging that it was his inner circle that enabled him to be able to engage in these acts, but hide these acts from the public and for it to go on.
However, the shock didn't end there. Daniel Phillip, an accused male escort who testified that he was paid between $700 and $6,000 for covert meetings with Diddy, once again astounded the courtroom. Phillip claims that during these sessions, Diddy would even wear a bandana over his face. Since he was the one writing the payments, the question of who exactly he was hiding from lingered. The jurors were on the edge of their seats as Phillip detailed the scene in graphic detail, complete with baby oil, Astroglide, and a well-chosen assortment of goods. His admission that he had once seen Cassie at one of these gatherings, hunched over and apparently intoxicated, was what really brought the room to a halt. According to the prosecution, Diddy purposefully used drugs to keep ladies under control in these unsettling circumstances. Thus, this was no accident. Don Richard, a former member of Donity Kane, gave one of the most unsettling testimony during the trial.
Defense wants to say that these women are all adults. They're all consenting and willing participants in.
She recounted a horrific incident in which Diddy allegedly threw Cassie to the ground with a skillet full of eggs, causing her to curl into a fetal position. There was stillness in the courtroom. Her testimony gave the prosecution's story, which depicts Diddy as the mastermind of a long-standing system of abuse, deceit, and cover-ups in another dimension. Prosecutors claimed that he had a devoted inner group that assisted him in carrying out and covering up heinous deeds for many years. They assert that he employed covert recordings and blackmail as control mechanisms to instill fear and quiet. Diddy's defense, however, is attempting to reframe the whole incident as a complex love tale entwined with financial conflicts, infidelity, and envy. They acknowledge that his actions were outrageous but not illegal. In their own words, he is a freak, not a felon.
Foundation for what we would consider a pattern of coercive control and really highlighted the power dynamics and imbalance between Diddy and Cassie Ventura.
By presenting text messages that implied Cassie might have started some of the interactions, the defense attempted to change the course of events by portraying the incident as mutual abuse. The prosecution, however, didn't believe it. This is much more than just another celebrity scandal. It's the possible end of a legacy, as Diddy faces the prospect of life in prison if found guilty. This is only the 5th day of testimony, which is astounding. When 8-month pregnant Cassie Ventura entered the courtroom, prepared to speak her truth after what she described as 11 years of physical and emotional torture, the entire attitude in the room altered. The whole courtroom was visibly moved by her description of living in continual fear, shaking, afraid, and trapped. Even veteran reporters were observed blotting their eyes. This was a lady taking back her voice after years of silence, not merely a witness taking the stand.
And then be like, man, they sent me the girl pictures, like pictures of, like, not the y'all saw.
Diddy allegedly threatened her career in the incriminating communications the prosecution produced, saying he could make one phone call and guarantee she would never work again. There was no denying the power disparity. The most heartbreaking part then arrived. Cassie testified about Diddy's alleged drug use and emotional instability, characterizing him as an addict who would go on sleep-deprived, day-long binges and eventually develop paranoia. Her allegation that Diddy surreptitiously recorded their private moments without her permission and used the material as a control mechanism, however, was what really astounded the jurors. "Nobody will believe you anyway," she remembered him telling her. A terrifying reminder of the psychological hold he allegedly had for more than 10 years. Cassie's testimony described emotional anguish and psychological control in a graphic manner. She called the cycle of abuse she experienced classic, textbook mistreatment, and it was evident that the jury was piecing together all the details. She shocked the room by saying,
You've been heavy on social media talking about it.
He did it. And I'm the only one who's been about this long before it actually.
Oh, you've been.
"I thought he would eliminate me if I left for good," in response to the prosecutor's question about why she stayed so long. There was a heavy quiet that made it possible to hear people breathing. In a heartbreaking admission, she then described how Diddy would reportedly force her into uncomfortable sexual experiences with male escorts as a form of punishment for simply looking at other guys, all the while directing the scenario like a deranged movie director. The defense tried to undermine her during cross-examination by portraying her as someone who was after Diddy's money. Cassie, however, did not recoil. With clarity and determination, she retaliated, stating that her only goal is to make sure he can never do this to anybody else. The whole atmosphere in the courtroom had shifted by the time she resigned. This was the emotional struggle of a woman to reclaim her life and dignity from one of the most influential people in the music industry.
50 Cent just sold a Diddy doc to next after a bidding war. Okay, so apparently there are more victims, and 50 Cent talks.
It was no longer celebrity drama. It's time for the truth to be revealed. According to industry sources, 50 has even been reaching out to additional possible victims, offering them a chance to tell their story in his documentary. Given his own contentious past, it's strange that he is presenting himself as hip-hop's justice warrior, but his supporters are on board. Even a new shirt bearing the slogan, "I believed her first," was released by his G-Unit brand, with the proceeds going to charities that combat domestic abuse. If 50 Cent is skilled at anything, it's how to make money off of mayhem. Whether you like him or not, he has made himself a major player in Diddy's legacy's fall, and judging by his reaction, he is relishing every moment of it. With his trademark combination of trolling, media savvy, and clever timing,
trying to poke some holes into the testimony she gave about the alleged she said took place toward the end of their relationship.
50 is thriving on the outside as Diddy sits in court facing bombshell claims. However, the real heat came inside the courtroom when Diddy's former inner circle members were called by the prosecution. They brought receipts with them, so they weren't merely witnesses. Marcus Thompson, Diddy's former chief of security, was the first to make some shocking disclosures. According to his testimony, he was expressly instructed to erect an impenetrable wall around Diddy and Cassie so that nobody could see what was actually happening behind closed doors. Thompson described an unsettling system in which hotel employees were paid in advance to disregard noise complaints and comply with odd demands without inquiry. The most damaging information, however, was when he disclosed that Diddy had a whole staff dedicated to digital cleansing, whose task it was to remove anything implicating before it was ever seen. As former members of Diddy's closest circle joined the stand, the disclosures kept coming in, each one more startling than the one before. According to Marcus Thompson, Diddy's former head of security, Diddy had a whole staff devoted to removing images and videos off the internet so that no proof of his actions would ever be seen. According to Thompson's testimony, they had direct contacts at social media businesses who would take down content without asking any questions in a matter of hours. Jessica Winters, a former executive assistant, then talked about keeping what she referred to as the Black Book, a physical record of individuals who had to be paid off after seeing upsetting events. Winters disclosed that there were hundreds of names in the book, with payouts ranging from $5,000 to more than $100,000. She also revealed that in order to get Cassie medical care, she had to make appointments under false pretenses with 3 different doctors in each place, strictly adhering to the rules of no records, cash only, and total confidentiality. One text read, "Need NDAs and cash ready, situation level 8, indicating they had a whole system for rating and handling these incidents. By the time this round of witnesses ended, the courtroom was left in shock. What was once assumed to be a series of isolated incidents now looked like an entire operation dedicated to covering up years of disturbing behavior. The defense tried to discredit the witnesses, portraying them as disgruntled former employees, but with 20 people telling similar stories, it was hard to ignore the undeniable pattern emerging. After all that explosive testimony, Diddy's defense team was obviously on the defensive, so when it was finally their turn to speak, they launched into an ambitious defense. With a straight face, lead attorney Mark Agnifilo told the jury that this case was about love, jealousy, infidelity, and money. The nerve of it! Their entire defense seemed to be based on the bizarre claim that Diddy is, and I quote, "a freak, not a felon." Yes, you read that right. That's what they said in court. They are essentially admitting to all the outrageous allegations, but they are trying to spin them as a part of his eccentric personality. The jury's reactions to this defense strategy were priceless. Agnifilo went all out, showing text messages from Cassie that purportedly showed her starting some of the encounters. He read aloud one that said, "I miss our wild nights," and another that asked when they could party with friends again. The defense attempted to change the narrative by showing Cassie as an enthusiastic participant in everything, but they didn't stop there. They brought in a parade of women who had dated Diddy before and after Cassie, all of whom claimed that he was never violent with them. One ex-girlfriend said, "He was always a gentleman with me," while another insisted, "The Sean I know couldn't hurt a fly." Meanwhile, the prosecution's face said it all. Are we even talking about the same person? The financial expert for the defense then testified, using data to support the claim that Cassie's earning potential increased dramatically following her connection with Diddy. They promoted the idea that she was only speaking out now in order to gain influence and money. As if to refute her assertions, the expert noted that her social media following had increased by 300% following the case. The defense started putting forth a hypothesis of mutual mistreatment. They attempted to portray Cassie as equally volatile by showing security footage of her swearing at Diddy after a fight. The prosecutor protested it away, claiming that it was a textbook victim-blaming case. The most startling part, however, was when the defense attempted to further distort the facts by claiming that Cassie's current husband Alex Fine, had urged her to come forward in order to exact revenge on Diddy. They even asserted that before Diddy even met Cassie, Mr. Fine had a plot against him. To be honest, the reach was enormous. Diddy sat through it all, mumbling to his lawyers or shaking his head now and then, but it was obvious that this wasn't working out the way they had hoped. The jury did not believe it. In fact, throughout the defense's presentation, one jury was seen rolling her eyes. The defense appeared to be trying everything to see what would stick, because the prosecution's case was so compelling. However, he's just a freak is perhaps not the best defense to rely on when you could spend the rest of your life behind bars.